also, when I was thinking about it from an organizational perspective, I think one of the issues that us as human beings, we have two things. One, we don't like change, and if we do change, we want to see the result instantly. And I think with, especially in a work environment with an organization, I think empathy, first of all, has to start from the top, come down, because the person at the top is the one that sets the culture for the rest.
Yeah.
And maybe some of the hesitation or some of the drawback could be like, I can imagine a manager be like, oh, I tried empathy yesterday, I didn't get the instant result I wanted, so no, this doesn't work. Do you understand what I mean? So how do we shift that perspective to understand that it's not just an action, it's about a whole cultural shift, and it's going to take some time to get to the place that we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and that's it. That is the conversation. It is going to take some time. Again, I think it's about, what I'm doing, having more of that in the world. So more awareness and more data around it, more of the evidence, more explanation of the benefits, because as we've discovered, it's something we're all built with. So it's a choice to use it or not. And creating more habit around it. Now, we are going to see slower uptake from people that have had longer careers behind them when they haven't really been doing this. So if you've already got 35 years behind you and you've never cared for this type of engagement, it's been an autocracy and what you say goes, and you sit in your office on the 27th floor and get on with it. Unlikely, right? Unlikely that those people are going to change. And you're right, culture does start at the top. However, there is change we can make within our organizations if we're not at the top, whilst that change is perhaps happening in the C-suite or from a larger sort of wider set. And empathy is contagious. So even if someone's listening today and they're in a team of, whether it's 5 people or 15 or 50, you can create empathy in your own teams. If you're within an organization that isn't imbuing that doesn't mean you can't do anything. There are changes to your own team culture, your own team meetings, your processes, the way you structure your status meetings or your weekly meetings, to imbue this and to spread it a little bit. So yeah, I always say to people, I'm not going to try and convince those that don't want to be convinced. Do you know what I mean? There's as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason not to try to understand each other better. There's only upside. But if you're not interested, then you're not interested.
Yeah, no, and that is a sentiment that I totally resonate with. Is I think you can't convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced, and I'm not going to spend my time trying to do that. And also think that you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. Like, you can do the best you can, but if that person or that is not convinced, or they don't want to receive what you're trying to say, nothing's going to happen. So
Yep.
It's better for both of you to just go, I guess, go your separate ways in that case.
Yeah.
And one thing you said though, and I think this is a misconception that a lot of people have, because at least in my perception, empathy it's a very positive thing. It sounds like it's easy, but you said that being an empathetic leader is not. And I know, given my own experience, and to actually be an empathetic person, it takes a lot of work, and you have to really, like, I don't know what the word is, like, really try to be curious and to understand where that person is coming from. So, but I think a lot of people have a misconception that, oh yeah, empathy is something easy to do, which is not.
Look, I think it's quite a multifaceted answer. I think it's quite easy. It is quite easy to understand people if you take the time and effort. Do you know what I mean? Even if you try it tonight with your family member, to try and really understand what they're saying when they're talking about their day, you'll find that on a one-off occasion, it's quite an easy thing to do. But I think you're absolutely right that to sustain that takes practice. But more importantly, I think what's really difficult and what makes empathetic leadership harder, and what I often talk about regenerative leadership, is to be able to respond to the data and the decision making that comes off the back of being an empathetic leader. So, I talk in my book a little bit about when I was turning around the business and I had to make redundancies. I had to change staff for the good of the business. We needed to. I had global requirements, local requirements, skill sets that we didn't have. But I had a team of amazing human beings, lovely, wonderful people. Nobody wants, and nobody who's ever been made redundant or has had to make people redundant knows there is no good way of doing that, right? It just sucks. Okay. But you can do that with empathy. And, I always commit to trying to make sure I do. But it is a little bit harder, right? Of course, I can't consider life any other way, but I do understand, I do empathize with some leaders that they might just want to bring people into a room and say, hi, Mimi, I'm really sorry, your role's no more redundant. Please speak to HR and I'll see you next week. I understand that some people want to do that. So, you know, making that change to spending more time, to understanding people's realities. As we said before, it takes time, it takes energy, but the benefits in every single way make that effort worthwhile, to the individual, to how the individual talks about your organization, to what they say to the team that hasn't been made redundant, that's waiting outside the door, to how you rebuild, to how the value they give you back in the interim and post, all kinds of benefits. So, you know, you're right, it can be, it can take more time and more effort. But then in life, I think most things that are worthwhile probably take time and effort.
I totally agree with that last part especially. And like you said, it is difficult to sustain. And this year in particular, because I had someone recently on the podcast and I was like, this year was probably the best. Like you said, it's not no one, because we're talking about how in COVID, lots of companies had to let people go. So, and like you said, there's nothing nice about that, and it does suck. But like you correctly said, and I think that this is a crucial step, is how did you do, like, how did you carry out that process? Did you, like, she gave me an example of Airbnb, who, even though they had to let people go, they either like give them counseling, or they'd help them, you know, find another job, or give them a good recommendation, or something, showing them that you actually care. And I think that's how, and that's what the whole difference is. If you have to do some, especially something like that, how you do it is what's important, not necessarily the action itself, because the person will still look back and be like, okay, yes, that happened, it was not the choice, but you know, they did something good for me, and they did try to help me in that way.